The loneliest marriages are not the loud ones. They are the quiet ones where one person slowly disappears. The restaurant glowed gold beneath hanging Edison bulbs while soft jazz drifted through the room like expensive perfume. Crystal glasses clinked. Someone at the far end of the table laughed too loudly. Ryan Carter leaned back in his chair with the relaxed confidence of a man who had not questioned his own importance in years. His navy suit fit perfectly. His watch caught the candlelight every time he lifted his wine glass. Across from him, Evelyn sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, smiling at conversations she was no longer part of. "Come on, man," Ryan's friend Mark said between laughs. "You and Evelyn are basically the perfect couple." Ryan smirked before taking a slow sip of red wine. "Please," he said casually. "My wife needs me more than I need her." The table erupted with soft laughter. Not cruel laughter. The comfortable kind. The kind people use when they assume nobody got hurt. Evelyn smiled too. Just enough to survive the moment. But under the white tablecloth, her fingers tightened around the linen napkin until her knuckles turned pale. Ryan never noticed. He was already telling another story about work, about investors, about the promotion everyone expected him to get next quarter. The waitress passed behind Evelyn carrying sizzling steaks that filled the air with butter and rosemary. Someone ordered another bottle of Cabernet. Outside the restaurant windows, rain painted silver streaks down the glass. Evelyn stared at them for 1 second too long. There was a time Ryan used to look for her eyes in crowded rooms. A time he reached for her hand without thinking. A time he called her during lunch breaks just to hear her voice. Back when their tiny apartment smelled like takeout noodles and fresh paint because they could only afford secondhand furniture and spent weekends fixing it together. Back when he used to say, "We're building this life together." Somewhere between the mortgage, the promotions, the endless business dinners, and the polished suburban kitchen with marble countertops, the word together quietly disappeared. Nobody saw it happen. Not even Evelyn. Dinner finally ended around 10:40 p.m. The valet brought the car around while cold rain tapped softly against the pavement. Ryan loosened his tie as he drove through the empty streets, one hand on the steering wheel, the other scrolling through emails at stoplights. "You've been quiet tonight," he said absent-mindedly. Evelyn looked out the passenger window at the blurred city lights melting across the wet glass. "Just tired," she answered softly. Ryan nodded once, already distracted again. When they reached home, the garage door rumbled open beneath the pale security lights. Their house stood perfectly still, beautiful and silent like a magazine photo nobody actually lived in. Upstairs, Ryan dropped his keys onto the dresser and changed into sweatpants. "I'm exhausted," he muttered. "Big meeting tomorrow." Then he climbed into bed and fell asleep within minutes. Evelyn remained standing in the bathroom doorway staring at herself in the mirror. The house hummed quietly around her. The dishwasher downstairs. The heater clicking on. Rain against distant windows. She removed her earrings slowly, placing them beside the sink one at a time. Her mascara had faded slightly beneath her eyes, though she had smiled through the entire dinner. She looked tired. Not physically. Soul tired. The kind that sleep never fixes. At 2:13 a.m., Evelyn sat on the cold bathroom floor with her knees pulled against her chest while the hallway light spilled faintly beneath the door. She pressed one trembling hand against her mouth to stop herself from making noise. Upstairs in their bedroom, Ryan slept peacefully beneath soft gray blankets, unaware that downstairs, his wife was quietly breaking apart in pieces too small for him to notice anymore. Some women do not leave all at once. They disappear one quiet piece at a time while standing right beside the person they once loved. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble kitchen counters in long pale strips, while the coffee machine hummed softly in the corner. Evelyn stood barefoot near the stove wearing Ryan's old college sweatshirt, stirring cream into his coffee exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars. Small splash of oat milk. No cinnamon. She remembered every detail automatically now, the same way people remember passwords they use every day. Upstairs, the shower turned off. A few seconds later, Ryan walked into the kitchen already scrolling through his phone. "Morning," Evelyn said gently. Ryan kissed the top of her head without looking up. "Morning." His eyes stayed fixed on an email while he grabbed the coffee from her hand. "I might be late tonight," he added. "Dinner with the Chicago clients." Evelyn nodded once. "Okay." Ryan took one sip before setting the mug down beside the sink. "This is cold." He did not say it cruelly. That was the part that hurt most. He said it carelessly, like commenting on the weather. Evelyn stepped forward immediately. "I can make another one." "No time," he answered, already reaching for his car keys. Then he was gone. The front door shut softly behind him, and the house returned to silence. Evelyn stood still for a moment, staring at the untouched coffee cooling beside the sink. Steam no longer rose from it. She poured it out slowly while the garbage disposal growled beneath the running water. 10 years earlier, Ryan used to drive 40 minutes across town just to bring her coffee during late study nights at design school. He used to call her brilliant whenever she showed him her sketches. Back then, he framed her artwork inside their apartment because they could not afford real decorations. One of those sketches still sat forgotten in the attic somewhere beneath old Christmas boxes and in used luggage. Evelyn cleaned the kitchen quietly before moving through the house room by room. Laundry, dishes, grocery list, mail stacked neatly on the counter. By noon, everything looked perfect. Magazine perfect. But nobody would have guessed how lonely the house felt once the vacuum stopped running. She opened the refrigerator and stared blankly inside without taking anything out. Half an hour later, she found herself standing in the upstairs hallway outside Ryan's home office. The door was cracked slightly open. His desk lamp still glowed faintly against scattered papers and framed awards. A photo from their 5th anniversary sat near the monitor. In the picture, Ryan held her close against a windy beach in Maine while she laughed with her eyes closed. Evelyn touched the edge of the frame gently. She could still remember the cold ocean air that day, the smell of salt water and sunscreen, the way Ryan once looked at her like she mattered more than anything else in his life. Now he barely looked at her at all. Around 4 in the afternoon, Evelyn sat alone at the dining table with a bowl of soup growing cold in front of her. Rain tapped softly against the windows again. The television played quietly in the background even though she was not watching it. Her phone buzzed once beside her plate. A text from Ryan. Dinner meeting ran longer. Do not wait up. No heart emoji. No question about her day. Nothing else. Evelyn stared at the message until the screen dimmed black. Then she set the phone face down and looked around the enormous dining room. 8 empty chairs surrounded the table. A chandelier glowed warmly overhead. The house looked expensive, successful, stable. But somewhere deep inside her chest, something heavy settled into place with terrifying clarity. Ryan no longer saw her as the woman he fell in love with. She had become part of the background of his life. Reliable, quiet, permanent. Like furniture he stopped noticing years ago. By the time a woman stops complaining, the marriage is usually already standing at the edge of something dangerous. 3 weeks passed quietly after that dinner. Nothing dramatic happened. No screaming matches. No slammed doors. No betrayal anyone could point to. That was the frightening part. Life simply continued as if nothing inside Evelyn had changed at all. Every morning, Ryan rushed through the kitchen with his Bluetooth headset on while financial news murmured from the television mounted above the fireplace. Every evening, the garage door opened sometime after dark, followed by the familiar sound of his leather shoes crossing the hardwood floor. Some nights he kissed her cheek. Some nights he forgot. Evelyn stopped noticing the difference. Outside, November settled over the neighborhood in shades of gray and silver. Bare tree branches scratched softly against the windows during windy nights. The mornings smelled like rain and cold pavement. One Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn stood inside the laundry room folding Ryan's dress shirts with mechanical precision. White shirts, blue shirts, gray ties. The dryer hummed beside her while an old song played quietly from her phone somewhere on the counter. She suddenly realized she could not remember the last time someone asked her what she wanted. Not for dinner. Not for the weekend. Not for her life. The thought arrived so suddenly, it left her standing completely still with one of Ryan's shirts hanging limp in her hands. Later that night, Ryan sat across from her at the kitchen island eating takeout pasta directly from the container while answering emails between bites. His laptop cast a pale blue glow across his face. Mark invited us to Aspen in January, he said distractedly. Probably good networking. Evelyn looked up from her tea. Do you want to go? Ryan shrugged. I mean, you would enjoy it. Not we. You. Small words. Tiny separations. They were happening everywhere now. Maybe, Evelyn answered softly. Ryan nodded without hearing the hesitation in her voice. His fingers kept typing while she sat there watching steam rise from her untouched teacup. At some point during the past few years, conversations between them had stopped feeling like connection and started feeling like scheduling. Around midnight, Evelyn woke to the sound of rain hitting the bedroom windows. The digital clock beside Ryan's side of the bed glowed 12:47 a.m. in soft red numbers. Ryan slept soundly beside her, one arm stretched across the mattress where she used to curl against him years ago. Evelyn stared at the ceiling for a long time before quietly slipping out of bed. Downstairs, the house felt enormous in the dark. She wrapped herself in a blanket and walked into the living room where city lights shimmered faintly through the tall glass windows. Their wedding photo still stood above the fireplace. Ryan had his arm around her waist in the picture while she leaned against him laughing into the wind. They looked happy, young, certain. Evelyn sat on the couch holding the blanket tightly around herself while the rain whispered outside. Her eyes drifted toward the built-in shelves near the television where old photo albums still sat untouched. A strange ache moved through her chest. She could remember exactly who she used to be before becoming someone's wife. Before every day became about supporting Ryan's ambitions, Ryan's schedule, Ryan's future. She used to sketch for hours in crowded coffee shops. Used to dream about opening her own interior design studio one day. Used to feel interesting, alive. Somewhere along the way, she stopped introducing herself as Evelyn. She became Ryan's wife. And somehow, even that role no longer felt important anymore. The next morning, Ryan adjusted his cufflinks near the front door while Evelyn handed him his travel mug. "I might have to fly to Boston next week," he said. "The investors are getting difficult." Evelyn nodded. "Okay." Ryan kissed her forehead quickly before reaching for the door. Then he paused for half a second. "You are quiet lately," he said casually. Not concerned, merely observant. Evelyn forced a small smile. "I am fine." Ryan accepted the answer immediately because it was easier than asking another question. The front door closed behind him. A few seconds later, the sound of his car disappeared down the street. Evelyn stood alone in the silence again, holding the warmth of the untouched coffee mug between both hands while something inside her slowly began going numb. Healing does not always begin with strength. Sometimes it begins with exhaustion. A few days after Ryan left for Boston, Evelyn woke before sunrise and realized the house felt strangely lighter without the constant pressure of waiting for someone else's attention. The silence no longer felt hostile. It simply felt empty. Outside, the sky over the neighborhood was painted soft gray while cold November fog hovered low above the streets. Evelyn stood in the kitchen holding a warm ceramic mug between her hands as the coffee machine hissed quietly behind her. For the first time in months, nobody needed anything from her. No schedules, no dinners, no conversations built around someone else's career. Just stillness. She looked out the window at the faint orange glow beginning to stretch across the horizon. Then something small but unexpected happened. She put on her coat and walked outside. The cold morning air hit her cheeks immediately. Leaves cracked beneath her sneakers as she moved slowly down the sidewalk past identical houses with glowing porch lights and silent garages. Her breath curled pale into the air with every step. She had forgotten what mornings smelled like before the world became busy. Wet pavement, pine trees, fresh coffee drifting from distant cafes opening downtown. She walked farther than she planned, nearly 2 miles, until she reached a quiet corner coffee shop tucked beside a bookstore she had never noticed before. Warm yellow lights spilled across the windows while soft acoustic music played faintly inside. Evelyn hesitated for 1 second before pushing open the door. The smell of espresso and cinnamon wrapped around her instantly. Students typed quietly on laptops. A couple sat near the back, sharing a blueberry muffin. Someone laughed softly beside the pastry counter. Evelyn ordered a vanilla latte and found a seat near the window where pale morning sunlight stretched across the wooden table. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup and stared outside while snow threatened in the clouds overhead. For the first time in years, nobody knew where she was. Nobody expected anything from her. The realization felt terrifying and strangely peaceful at the same time. Her eyes drifted toward the bookstore next door where art supplies were displayed in the front window. Sketchbooks, pencils, design magazines. Something deep inside her stirred painfully. 30 minutes later, Evelyn walked out carrying a small cream-colored sketchbook tucked beneath her arm. The cashier had smiled while placing it into the paper bag. "Starting something new?" she asked casually. Evelyn almost answered no. Instead, after a brief hesitation, she whispered, "Maybe." Back at home, she sat at the dining table while weak winter sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. The enormous house remained perfectly silent except for the ticking clock above the stove. Evelyn opened the blank sketchbook slowly. The clean white pages almost intimidated her. She had not drawn seriously in nearly 10 years. Her fingers hovered uncertainly above the paper before finally pressing pencil to the page. At first, the lines felt shaky, rusted, but gradually, shapes began forming beneath her hand almost instinctively. Curved chairs, window designs, soft neutral interiors filled with light. Her breathing slowed as hours quietly disappeared around her. She did not hear her phone buzzing twice on the kitchen counter. She did not notice the rain beginning outside again. For the first time in years, her mind belonged entirely to herself. That evening, Ryan called from Boston while Evelyn stood barefoot in the kitchen reheating soup. "Flight got delayed," he said distractedly over airport announcements in the background. "I will probably get home tomorrow afternoon." "Okay," Evelyn answered calmly. "Everything all right there?" Ryan asked absent-mindedly, clearly reading emails while speaking. Evelyn looked toward the dining room table where her open sketchbook rested beneath warm, overhead lighting. Pencil marks still covered her fingertips. A faint smile touched her lips before disappearing again. "Yeah," she said softly. "Everything is fine." But this time, for the first time in a very long while, she was not lying. Sometimes the most dangerous moment in a marriage is when a woman remembers she once had dreams before she became useful to everyone else. Winter settled deeper over the city during the following weeks. The mornings grew colder. Frost gathered along the edges of car windows before sunrise, and people hurried through downtown sidewalks with scarves wrapped tightly around their necks. Every morning after Ryan left for work, Evelyn found herself returning to the little coffee shop beside the bookstore. At first, she told herself it was only for the quiet, the warm light, the smell of espresso and cinnamon, the simple comfort of existing somewhere nobody expected her to perform a role. But gradually, something else brought her back. She started sketching there almost every day now, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for 3 hours without noticing time pass. Her pencils moved more confidently across the pages with each visit. Interior spaces filled with soft lighting, modern hotel lounges, elegant reading corners beside oversized windows. It felt like reconnecting with a language she once spoke fluently before life convinced her to forget it. One snowy Thursday morning, Evelyn sat near the front window wearing a cream sweater beneath her long wool coat, while soft jazz played overhead. Her sketchbook lay open beside a half-finished latte. Outside, snow drifted slowly across the street in pale white swirls. She was shading the details of a hotel lobby staircase when a voice beside her interrupted gently. "You designed this?" Evelyn looked up quickly. The man standing there appeared to be somewhere in his early 40s, tall, composed, dressed in a charcoal overcoat dusted lightly with snow. He held a black coffee in one hand while studying her sketchbook with quiet concentration rather than casual politeness. Evelyn instinctively closed the sketchbook halfway. "Just old habits," she answered softly. The man smiled faintly. Old habits usually do not understand balance and spatial flow this well. Evelyn blinked in surprise. Most people only said things like pretty or nice when they looked at her drawings. Nobody had spoken about them like that in years. "You work in design?" she asked carefully. "Hospitality architecture," he answered. "Mostly boutique hotels." Then he extended one hand politely. "Adrian Cole." Evelyn shook his hand. "Evelyn Carter." Adrian glanced once more toward the sketchbook still partially open beneath her hand. "That staircase concept is strong," he said calmly. "You gave the room breathing space without making it feel cold." Most designers overfill luxury interiors because they confuse wealth with clutter. Evelyn stared at him for a second. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed softly. A real laugh. Small, but genuine enough that even she seemed startled by it. Adrian smiled slightly in return before checking his watch. "I did not mean to interrupt your morning," he said. "But for what it is worth, you should not leave talent like that sitting inside a notebook forever." Then he walked toward a table near the back of the cafe. leaving Evelyn frozen beside the window with warmth slowly spreading through her chest. Not because he flirted with her. He had not. Not because he complimented her appearance. He never mentioned it once. But because for the first time in years, someone looked at her and saw something beyond the role she performed for everyone else. That afternoon, Evelyn returned home carrying snowflakes on her coat sleeves and a strange, restless energy in her chest. The house no longer felt as suffocating as before, though it still carried the same silence. She placed her sketchbook carefully on the dining table just as the garage door opened downstairs. Ryan stepped inside, loosening his tie with one hand while speaking into his phone about investors and quarterly numbers. "No. Push the meeting to Monday," he muttered before finally hanging up. He barely glanced toward her. "Long day." "Welcome home," Evelyn answered quietly. Ryan tossed his keys onto the counter and opened the refrigerator. "Anything for dinner?" Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Snow still melted slowly from the edges of her coat. Her sketchbook remained open nearby, revealing pages full of designs Ryan never even noticed. "I was thinking soup," she said softly. "Whatever is easiest," Ryan replied absent-mindedly. Then he disappeared upstairs without another question. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen again, but this time the silence felt different, less painful, because somewhere inside her, something long buried had finally begun waking up. There are moments in life when a single conversation quietly divides everything into before and after. December arrived wrapped in cold rain and silver skies. Christmas lights glowed across suburban rooftops while soft holiday music followed people through grocery stores and crowded downtown sidewalks. But inside the Carter house, nothing truly felt warm anymore. Ryan grew busier as the end of the fiscal year approached. Conference calls stretched late into the night. Business dinners filled the calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Some evenings, he barely touched the dinner Evelyn prepared before disappearing upstairs with his laptop balanced beneath one arm. And yet, strangely, Evelyn no longer waited for him the way she once did. Every morning now began the same way. Long walks through the freezing air. Coffee beside the bookstore. Sketchbook open beneath warm cafe lighting. The quiet rebuilding of a woman remembering herself piece by piece. Adrian appeared often, though never predictably. Sometimes he sat across the room, working silently for hours. Sometimes he only stopped briefly to exchange a few words before leaving for meetings downtown. He never pushed, never flirted carelessly, never treated her loneliness like an invitation. Instead, he asked questions nobody had asked her in years. What inspired this layout? Why did you choose softer lighting here? Do you always balance texture before color? Simple questions. But every answer slowly brought Evelyn back to life. One snowy afternoon, Adrian arrived carrying architectural blueprints rolled beneath one arm, while the cafe windows fogged softly from the warmth inside. He noticed Evelyn sketching immediately. "You changed the proportions," he said, nodding toward her drawing. Evelyn looked up with faint surprise. "You remembered?" Adrian gave a small shrug while removing his gloves. "Good design is hard to forget." Evelyn smiled despite herself. Adrian studied the sketch for another quiet moment before pulling out the chair across from her. "I actually wanted to ask you something." His tone shifted slightly more serious. "I am overseeing a luxury hotel renovation downtown. We lost one of our interior consultants 3 weeks ago." Evelyn blinked once, unsure where the conversation was heading. Adrian continued calmly. "I think you would be excellent on the project." The words landed so suddenly, she almost laughed from disbelief. "Me? Yes, you." "Adrian, I have not worked professionally in almost 10 years. Talent does not disappear because life interrupted it." Evelyn looked down at her sketchbook while snow drifted slowly outside the cafe windows. Her heart beat unevenly beneath her coat. Part excitement, part fear. "I would not even know where to start anymore," she admitted quietly. Adrian leaned back slightly, watching her with steady calm. "Then start by remembering you were good before someone convinced you that your only value was supporting their life instead of building your own." Evelyn looked up sharply. Adrian did not say anything else after that. He simply reached into his briefcase and slid a clean white business card across the table toward her. "Cole Atelier Hospitality Group." Adrian stood a moment later. "Think about it," he said softly. "No pressure." Then he left, disappearing into the snowy downtown crowd beyond the glass. That evening, Evelyn arrived home later than usual with the business card tucked carefully inside her coat pocket. The house smelled faintly like cedar wood from the Christmas candles she forgot to blow out that morning. Ryan sat at the kitchen island reviewing spreadsheets on his laptop, while sports highlights played silently on television nearby. "You are home late," he commented without looking up. Evelyn removed her gloves slowly. "I stopped for coffee." Ryan nodded distractedly. "Must be nice." Evelyn hesitated briefly before speaking. "Someone offered me a design consulting opportunity today." That finally pulled Ryan's attention away from the screen for half a second. Design. A hotel renovation project downtown. Ryan leaned back slightly with mild surprise before giving a short laugh. Not cruel, just dismissive. "Wow, a hobby comeback." The words hit harder than he intended because he never even realized they could hurt. Evelyn stood very still beside the counter. Ryan had already returned to typing before adding casually, "I mean, if it keeps you busy, why not?" Keeps you busy. As though her dreams were small, decorative things meant to fill empty hours between laundry and dinner. Evelyn stared at him quietly while Christmas lights reflected softly across the kitchen windows behind him. Then she reached into her coat pocket and touched the edge of Adrian's business card with trembling fingers. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her talent and seen a future. And suddenly, Ryan's small, careless words no longer sounded powerful. They sounded distant. The most powerful transformations happen so quietly that the people losing you do not even notice until it is already too late. January arrived with sharp winds and frozen mornings. Snow covered the edges of sidewalks downtown, while gray clouds hung low above the city skyline. Inside the Carter house, the distance between Evelyn and Ryan had become strangely polite. They no longer argued because there was almost nothing left to fight over. Ryan still left early every morning wearing tailored coats and carrying expensive coffee in insulated travel mugs. Evelyn still smiled gently when he walked through the kitchen. But now there was a calmness inside her that unsettled something invisible between them. She no longer followed him from room to room, trying to hold conversations together. No longer waited anxiously for him to notice her moods. No longer rearranged her entire day around his schedule. She had quietly stopped orbiting him. And Ryan, too distracted to understand why the house suddenly felt different, mistook her silence for peace. The hotel project with Adrian began slowly at first. A few meetings downtown, design consultations, material selections spread across large conference tables beneath warm architectural lighting. Evelyn felt nervous during the first meeting, walking into the glass tower lobby, wearing a camel-colored coat and carrying her sketchbook against her chest like armor. But the moment she began discussing spatial layouts and lighting balance, something instinctive awakened inside her completely. Words returned naturally. Confidence returned quietly. Adrian never hovered or praised excessively. That was what made his respect feel real. He treated her like someone capable, someone intelligent. During one afternoon presentation, Evelyn explained her redesign concept for the hotel lounge while executives studied the renderings displayed across giant digital screens. Soft walnut textures, warm neutral lighting, open spaces designed to feel elegant without feeling cold. When she finished speaking, the room remained silent for one long second before one of the investors nodded slowly. "This feels human," he said. "Most luxury spaces forget that." Evelyn glanced toward Adrian instinctively. He gave only the smallest nod from across the table, but somehow it meant more than applause. Later that evening, snow fell heavily outside while Evelyn rode the elevator down from the 32nd floor with flushed cheeks and trembling hands. Not from fear this time, from exhilaration. She had forgotten what it felt like to be proud of herself. When she reached home, the house was dark except for the kitchen pendant lights glowing softly above the island. Ryan sat there loosening his tie while scrolling through financial reports on his tablet. "You are late," he said without looking up. "Meeting ran long." Evelyn answered while hanging her coat carefully by the door. Ryan glanced toward her briefly. "For the hotel thing?" "Yes." Ryan nodded slowly before giving a faint smirk. "Still doing that?" Evelyn paused. The question sounded strange to her now, as though the project were temporary entertainment instead of real work. "Yes," she said calmly. Ryan returned his attention to the screen. "Well, as long as you are enjoying yourself." Enjoying yourself. The same tone someone might use for gardening classes or yoga retreats. Evelyn stood silently beside the counter watching snow drift outside the windows while exhaustion suddenly washed through her chest. Not because Ryan was cruel, but because he still did not see her. Not really. A week later, Ryan's company announced its annual winter gala at the newly renovated luxury hotel downtown. The event had become one of the largest networking nights of the year. Investors, executives, industry press. Ryan adjusted his cufflinks while reading the invitation at the kitchen counter one evening. "Looks like spouses are invited," he said casually. "You should come." Evelyn glanced up from her laptop, where hotel renderings still glowed softly across the screen. "You want me there?" Ryan shrugged while reaching for his coat. "It is expected." Then, after a brief pause, he added with distracted confidence, "Besides, you know these things are easier when you are beside me." Evelyn looked at him carefully across the warm kitchen lighting. Somewhere months ago, those words would have made her feel needed, important. Now they simply sounded outdated. Ryan walked upstairs without noticing the expression in her eyes. A few seconds later, Evelyn's phone buzzed softly against the counter. A message from Adrian appeared on the screen. Final presentation was approved. "Congratulations, Evelyn. Also, do not make plans next Thursday night. You deserve to see what you helped create." Evelyn stared at the message while snow pressed softly against the dark windows outside. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. The saddest thing about losing someone is realizing they stopped needing your attention long before you noticed they were gone. Thursday evening arrived beneath falling snow and glittering city lights. Downtown streets shimmered with reflections from black cars and glowing hotel windows, while people in formal coats hurried through the cold carrying invitations and champagne laughter into the night. The newly renovated hotel stood at the center of it all like a modern palace of glass and gold. Warm amber lighting spilled across marble floors inside the lobby, while soft piano music floated through the enormous open space. Ryan adjusted the cuff of his tailored black suit as he stepped through the entrance beside Evelyn. "Big night," he murmured confidently while scanning the crowd for investors and executives. Evelyn simply nodded. Tonight, she wore a silver satin gown that moved softly with every step beneath her long cream-colored coat. Her hair rested in loose waves over one shoulder, and for the first time in years, she carried herself without shrinking beside him. Ryan noticed it vaguely but could not explain why she suddenly seemed unfamiliar. "Stay close tonight," he said casually while handing their invitations to the hostess. "A lot of important people are here." Evelyn looked at him quietly for 1 second before answering softly, "I know." Ryan barely heard the meaning behind her words. The ballroom beyond the lobby glowed beneath towering crystal chandeliers, while servers carried trays of champagne through clusters of wealthy guests dressed in black silk and polished confidence. Massive floor-to-ceiling screens displayed elegant renderings of the hotel renovation project rotating slowly across the walls. Ryan immediately slipped into networking mode. Handshakes, smiles, market conversations, quarterly forecasts. He introduced Evelyn absent-mindedly several times as "my wife," before drifting toward more important discussions. And strangely, for the first time, Evelyn did not follow him. Instead, she wandered slowly through the ballroom watching guests admire details she had once drawn quietly inside a sketchbook beside a coffee shop window. The curved walnut panels near the lounge. The warm recessed lighting along the marble columns. The textured seating spaces designed to feel intimate without sacrificing elegance. Her fingerprints existed everywhere in this room, though almost nobody knew it yet. A server offered her champagne. Evelyn accepted with calm hands while soft music echoed beneath the chandeliers overhead. Across the ballroom, Ryan laughed beside a group of executives while explaining investment strategies with the same relaxed confidence he always carried. Then suddenly, the lights dimmed slightly. Conversations softened across the room as attention shifted toward the enormous central screen above the ballroom stage. Ryan turned casually at first, expecting another corporate presentation. But the moment the screen illuminated, something inside him froze. Evelyn Carter, lead interior visionary, appeared in massive, elegant letters across the glowing display. Beneath it, images of the hotel renovation began slowly transitioning across the screen. Her sketches, her concepts, her work. Ryan stared upward in stunned silence while murmurs spread through the ballroom around him. "That is your wife?" one investor asked beside him with visible surprise. Ryan opened his mouth slightly, but no answer came out immediately. On stage, Adrian Cole stepped beneath the spotlight wearing a dark tailored suit, while applause echoed softly through the ballroom. Calm, composed, respected by everyone in the room. Before tonight continues, Adrian said into the microphone, there is someone this project would not exist without. His eyes moved through the crowd until they found Evelyn standing quietly near the back of the ballroom, holding a champagne glass beneath golden light. Evelyn, he said warmly, would you join me up here? Hundreds of heads turned toward her at once. Ryan felt his chest tighten unexpectedly as Evelyn slowly crossed the ballroom floor in silver satin and soft confidence. She did not rush, did not look nervous. She simply looked like a woman finally stepping back into herself. The applause grew louder as she reached the stage beside Adrian. Ryan stood frozen among the crowd while enormous renderings of her designs illuminated the ballroom walls around him. Then Adrian smiled faintly before speaking words Ryan would never forget. Luxury is easy to build, Adrian said calmly. But warmth is rare. Evelyn gave this space a soul. The room erupted into applause again. Investors stood. Executives nodded with admiration. Cameras flashed softly across the ballroom. And somewhere beneath the crystal chandeliers and glowing golden light, Ryan realized something devastating. The woman standing on that stage had never disappeared. He had simply stopped seeing her. Some endings do not arrive with screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes they arrive as silence inside a house that finally reveals how empty it has always been. Snow continued falling long after the gala ended. White flakes drifted through the dark city streets beneath glowing traffic lights, while black cars disappeared into the winter night one by one. Ryan drove home in complete silence with both hands tight around the steering wheel. The city lights blurred across the windshield while Evelyn sat beside him, staring quietly out the passenger window. The silver fabric of her gown shimmered faintly beneath the dashboard lights. Ryan glanced toward her twice during the drive, but could not seem to find the right words. Every sentence that formed inside his mind suddenly sounded small compared to what he had witnessed that night. He kept replaying the ballroom in fragments. The applause, the investors surrounding her, Adrian standing beside her with visible respect, the enormous glowing screen carrying her name above an entire room full of powerful people. And worst of all, the realization that everyone else seemed to understand Evelyn's value before he ever did. When they finally pulled into the driveway, the garage door rumbled open slowly beneath the cold blue security lights. Neither of them moved immediately after the engine shut off. The silence inside the car felt almost fragile. Ryan loosened his tie with trembling fingers before finally speaking. Why did you never tell me? Evelyn turned toward him calmly. Would you have listened? The question landed softly. No anger. No accusation. Somehow that hurt more. Ryan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because deep down, he already knew the answer. Evelyn stepped out of the car first. Snow crunched softly beneath her heels as she walked toward the front door. Ryan followed several steps behind, watching her with unfamiliar eyes. For years he believed he understood his wife completely. The quiet woman who made coffee every morning. The woman who folded laundry while he answered emails. The woman who smiled politely beside him at company dinners. He never realized how much of her he had stopped seeing. Inside, the house greeted them with darkness and stillness. Evelyn removed her coat slowly and hung it beside the doorway. Ryan stood near the kitchen island watching her move through the familiar space that suddenly no longer felt familiar at all. Evelyn, he said quietly. She paused, but did not turn around immediately. Ryan swallowed hard. You were incredible tonight. Evelyn lowered her eyes for one brief second. Thank you. Then silence again. Ryan suddenly hated the silence. Hated how distant she sounded standing only a few feet away from him. Months ago, she would have searched his face for validation after a moment like tonight. She would have wanted his approval, his pride. Now she looked calm without needing any of it. I did not know you still wanted this, Ryan admitted carefully. Evelyn turned toward him then, and for the first time in years, he saw exhaustion in her eyes instead of longing. That is because you stopped asking me who I was a long time ago. The words settled heavily between them. Ryan looked down at the marble countertop while the refrigerator hummed quietly in the background. Somewhere upstairs, the heater clicked on against the winter cold. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary house. Yet everything felt altered now. Evelyn walked slowly toward the dining room, where her sketchbook still rested open from the night before. Ryan watched her fingertips brush lightly across the pages filled with designs and notes and pieces of herself he had overlooked for years. "I never meant to hurt you," he said softly. Evelyn nodded once. "I know. That was the tragedy of it." Ryan had not destroyed their marriage through cruelty. He destroyed it through absence, through carelessness, through years of assuming she would always remain exactly where he left her emotionally. Evelyn closed the sketchbook gently before looking toward the dark window where snow continued falling outside. "The strange thing is," she whispered quietly, "I spent years believing I was disappearing because I was not enough." Ryan looked at her then with something dangerously close to grief. Evelyn gave a faint sad smile before continuing. "But I was disappearing because I kept asking someone else to tell me I mattered." The room fell silent once more. No dramatic ending. No shattered glass. No raised voices. Just two people standing inside a beautiful house, finally confronting the distance that had been growing quietly between them for years. Upstairs, the bedroom light still glowed softly from where Ryan left it on earlier that evening. But for the first time since they married, it no longer felt like home to Evelyn. She looked around the silent kitchen one last time before exhaling slowly, almost peacefully. Then she walked past Ryan toward the staircase without waiting for him to follow. And standing there alone beneath the dim kitchen lights while snow covered the world outside in white silence, Ryan finally understood the cruelest truth of all. She did not need him anymore. She had already found herself.